Hey, I'm gonna go shut that door 1 minute. So, you want some help with Rooster, do you? Don't you worry, pals. I've got some help for you. Here is a beginner's guide to Rooster. All of the beginner's information that you need to know about Rooster, the legendary work by Christopher Bruce. So, Rooster was created in 1991 by a legendary choreographer, Christopher Bruce. Christopher Bruce was a choreographer for Rambert. He trained at the Rambert School. He was a soloist for the company. He was a choreographer. Later on down the line, he choreographed loads and loads of works. He was a key figure in British contemporary dance. Some of his works include Swan Song, Rooster, Ghost Dances. He choreographed not only for contemporary dance but also for modern dance. He choreographed the musical Joseph and the Amazing Technicolour Dreamcoat. When the work was created in 1991, Christopher Bruce was not working for Rambert Dance Company. He was being a freelance dance choreographer. He took the position of many roles throughout his time at Rambert. So he started off in the company as a dancer, as a soloist. Then he went into choreography. He was associate director between 1975 and 1987. Then he was associate choreographer between 1987 and 94. And then he became artistic director in 1994 and he finished in 2002. I did not just write all that down on my hand. Liars. But at this time when Rooster was created, he wasn't working for the company. He was being a freelancer. He initially mounted the dance on Ballet au Grand Theatre de Geneva. And then in 1992, I believe, he took it over to the UK. He didn't mount it on Rambert at this point. He was mounting it on London Contemporary Dance Theatre. And then in 1994, when he did become artistic director of Rambert Dance Company, he put it onto the company. Why did he do this, might you ask? The reason why this work was put on in 1994, I believe, was because at this point, Rambert was having a bit of a struggle getting audiences in, and it was kind of a low point for the company. They had no artistic director at this point. Richard Alston had left 2 years previously, and the company was I believe, was heading into some financial difficulties. So in 1994, Christopher Bruce decided to take on the role of artistic director, having turned it down in 1992. And I think this was one of his first pieces that he put back on. This was for a couple of reasons, because Rooster had already had runs previously. People in the dance world already knew it and people would go and see it. But also because it was set to the music of the Rolling Stones, it was more likely that you would be able to get an audience who wasn't as interested in dance but might be interested to go see it because of the music. It might further Rambert's audience and introduce a new audience to Rambert, which is what the company needed at that time. So why did Christopher Bruce make a dance to the music of the Rolling Stones? Because he flipping well wanted to. What I'm saying there is that the stimulus of the piece was the music. From this music of the Rolling Stones, we get the setting for the piece, which is the 1960s. The piece is described as a celebration of 1960s and Christopher Bruce's youth. It's basically a celebration of the 1960s in all its forms, in all its good bits and all its pretty bad bits. So one of the main themes of the piece is male chauvinism. If you don't know what male chauvinism is, it is basically the idea of males being of a higher position and being better than females. You can see the influence of this theme throughout the piece. So the males in the piece have this snooty nature about them. They seem to show off to each other. They seem to always command the space. Particularly within the first couple of dances and in a couple of the duos, you really see this egotistical, snooty, high and mighty view of the males. Which is actually one of the reasons why the piece might be called Rooster. My interpretation of it, although there are multiple interpretations of Christopher Bruce's works, because he doesn't want people necessarily to read a narrative from his pieces. My interpretation of this idea of the rooster is that the males seem to rule the roost as a cockerel would rule over a pen full of female chickens, hens. In a similar way, the males of this piece feel that they are top dog. They are the highest position. They believe that they can do no wrong. They believe that in some cases they even own the women. Their women are sexualized, and the males kind of feel like they have a right to the women. In a similar way, this kind of snooty nature maybe reflects that of a rooster, and why Christopher Bruce has used so many rooster-like gestures within the piece. But this could also be said to be influenced by the music of the Rolling Stones as well, because there is sort of a barnyard feel to the music. I'm also going to give you some key motifs here, because I love a good motif, and one of the key ones is the Little Red Rooster. And I think it's also really important to know how to explain these fully and in detail. Whenever you're doing a movement example, remember action, space, dynamic, and first of all describe the motif, then explain the motif, then analyse it even further by using your context. So here is an example of how you might describe and explain the rooster strut. In the opening motif of Rooster, the rooster strut is performed, a smooth dragging step with a low centre of gravity, moving across downstage with the dancer's elbows resting on his hips and his wrists relaxed. With each step the dancer takes, he performs a sharp, head-jutting isolation forwards. This movement, as the title of the piece suggests, mimics the way in which a cockerel moves. Bruce's characterisation of the males as roosters suggests a self-assertive arrogance, almost suggesting the soloist to rule the roost. The way in which he paces across the stage could represent a male guarding his territory, further establishing his higher position amongst his peers. I've talked a lot about the men, but obviously there are women in the piece. The women in the piece are often sexualised, particularly in the dance Little Red Rooster. You can see this as the first time we see a woman. She comes on stage moving her hips in this sort of sexual figure of eight way, bringing her arm up to the front while a male walks slowly to her, eyeing her up. It's a bit creepy if you ask me. But it's the time in the 1960s. It was the first time where it was seen as okay for women to be sexual in public, I guess. Fashion started to change with like Twiggy and Mary Quant. Females were taken out of this role of the housewife. Were being seen as actual people, but obviously this was the first time to express their femininity and sexuality, but that doesn't mean that they still weren't taken advantage of by the males. But also women are presented as feminine but strong, particularly in the dances Paint It Black, with the three women who basically tear down this man. Ruby Tuesday, where a woman potentially is deciding over whether she should leave a hippie lifestyle or take on the traditional role of being a mother. In Play With Fire, where the woman seems to be taking control of the man again, this time in a more like flirtatious sexual way and trying to get the attention of the man. And this obviously relates to the 1960s because of second wave feminism, which was more about women gaining like more reproductive rights within the workplace. After the initial wave of feminism, which was like suffragettes, this was a time for women to actually start making a name for themselves within art and within work and within their own femininity, you know? Throughout the piece there are obviously demonstrations of 1960s culture. You have movements that reflect Mick Jagger, a little doo-wop group in the back of one of the dances, which I kind of relate to like Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. Hippie culture, there's influence of Lindy Hop and other 1960s social dance like Go-Go Girls. This being a key aspect of Christopher Bruce's choreography. He loves to involve different styles within his dances, and there's also just this wonderful youthful spirit of the work. The piece just seemed to have this kind of youthful aspect around it because the 1960s was kind of the birth of the teenage. It's also noted that this was the time of Christopher Bruce's youth. So it wasn't only reflective of the 1960s as a whole, but more specifically to Christopher Bruce. And there is a very lovely, oh my god, as tears go by. If you haven't seen Rooster yet, please just go watch As Tears Go By because it's my favourite dance, and the music just makes me cry every time I hear it. I love it, and it's just so sad. Once you go and watch it, it has a lot of influence of this playground drama, I would call it. Young woman and a young man being isolated and being an outsider in the playground. It's very, very sad, but I love it. I just love it. I just love it. I'm just going to finally talk about the design of the show because I think that's very important to speak about. It's classic. It's a black box proscenium arch theatre. Rolls off the tongue from GCSE, that. So all the males are dressed in different bright coloured, dandy styled costumes, all contrasting colours. They're made to stand out and be loud and proud. They've got vibrant patterns, vibrant colours. It's all very in your face. Here I am, this is me. They can be individual. Whereas the women of the piece are all dressed in exactly the same black A-line dresses with red slits. They are all identical. Because although this was a time of feminism and a time of rights, women's rights, but it was still pretty bad for women, and they were a bit hidden in society. They were seen as more of a group perhaps, whereas the men could be individual and could be themselves. But these are all just starting points, basically. This is what this video is. It's a starting point. I encourage you to go away and learn and watch Rooster many times. If you're doing this for A-level, you will have to watch it many times, I'm sorry. Go away, find really useful movement examples and read as much as you possibly can, taking everything, and then go away and condense your notes and revise and then go take your exam and then work out what you're going to do with your life. Hope this was informative. Tell me if you would like any more. I will happily help you out because I love dance and dance A-level, and I'm passionate about this subject, and I think that everyone should do it if they want to do it, and they shouldn't be put down because they're like, oh, I'm not going to do dance as an A-level because it's stupid. I'm like, no, it isn't stupid. Actually, it's really good. And also just Christopher Bruce is really interesting, and yeah, I don't know what this has become, but now I'm doing this. Okay. Subscribe! I like you.